refuge in the
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put palms down. Well, good evening, everybody. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. It's really kind of neat to see everybody. I get to sit up here a lot and make up a bunch of stuff and pretend I know some Buddhist things, but it's really cool to see. This is just what popped into my head when I was doing my offering, like to see so many different people come together seeking something that is relatively the same thing, which is some sense of peace and calm or stillness or quiet or whatever words or phrases you use to describe whatever got you here. It's very similar. Most people don't show up to meditation or Buddhist stuff because they want to make themselves feel worse, right? Did anyone come here thinking you would feel worse than when you left? Or when you know what I mean, right? And there's something really beautiful about creating a community where the intention is pretty much the same. And ironically enough, these are the same people sitting here. I hate to jump to this part already, but these are the same people sitting here right now that drive you crazy all day long. Right? So in a place like this, you all come together from all different walks of life and experiences and the way you were raised and the families you were in and the friends you had and your careers. And we come from so many different walks of life in this room. But what you'll see over the next 45 minutes to an hour is you will all get along incredibly well, right? I mean, I get it. Part of that is because I'm talking 80% of the time, so, but you'll get along. And then you're going to leave here, 45 minutes to an hour, and you're going to go back outside, and you'll get so irritated and challenged and frustrated and mad and angry and sad with a few bouts of happiness in there as well. And it's really the same people that are here. Some of them might even be sitting next to you. It depends if you came with somebody. But that's really the cool thing about creating a Sangha, a community of people, is you get to see that, wow, we collectively can come together for a period of time and all get along. And those who cut you off in traffic and respond to you in ways you don't want through customer service or in lines at Starbucks or in the grocery store, your colleagues, your family members, all those people that drive you crazy, they're also in this room. And what that shows you is that you're able to get along with people anywhere. So for me, this path and Buddhist practice and meditation isn't, especially for those who might be new, which often people tonight are, some of you are brand new, and this could be the first time you've ever gone to any Buddhist thing in your life. And it's just to remind you that learning about Buddhism and meditation isn't so much about learning about Buddhism or meditation here. It's about taking what you learn here and applying it into your everyday life. Otherwise, it doesn't really do you much good. So when you're challenged tonight, just remind yourself that everyone's struggling. Everyone's dealing with their own battles, their own challenges, and their own difficulties, just like you are. And if you can become aware of that, then it helps to have a little bit more compassion, empathy for others as they trigger you and kind of send you off in directions that you don't want to go into mentally or emotionally. So with that being said, we'll start with a meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. I mean, you don't ask yourself, is this working? Is it not working? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. Practice of meditation is not escaping from it, but learning to get quiet and still within it. You won't think nothing. Often people think meditation is about thinking nothing or trying to empty or go blank. Your mind will continue to race. I'll say things periodically to bring you back to the present moment, or simply wake you up because you fell asleep, which isn't the end of the world, but you didn't come all this way to fall asleep. So do your best to stay awake. Posture, you want to be comfortable. If you're on the cushions, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing your stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you're on the benches or chairs, also sitting up straight. Relaxing the shoulders. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, don't expect anything but to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Knowing throughout the practice, you'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. These are not distractions, not disruptions. Simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing the sensation of breath. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. Where's your mind? Lost in thought. Return to breath. with the body still, rested. And the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. And the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Most important, practice meditation. So recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, it's quiet, calm, still, peaceful. Has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He's a human being no different than anyone in this room who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us in this room, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get. Now, most people respond to the last 20 minutes quietly, peacefully, still. The question is, how do you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day? And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily a fun practice, but it's incredibly important. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's learning to take care of the most important thing, which is yourself. We spend so much time trying to fix, change, control, manipulate everything around us, everyone around us. Hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they would do this, wishing they would do that. This is learning to get control of your mind and your thoughts and your reactions to the world around you. It's becoming aware of everything you think and everything you say and everything you do, because that creates your reality. The world will never do everything you want it to. People will never say everything you want them to say. They won't do everything you want them to do. We can't even get ourselves to do the things we want to do. Why do we think we can get others to do what we want them to do? This practice is not an escape. Often, especially if you're new, people think that meditation is just going to fix everything. Right? If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, then this isn't going to fix that. It might give you a few moments of peace and quiet, but really what it's doing is it's making you become aware of why your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess. So you can then actually make changes throughout your day to settle things down. To me, this practice is simply every day holding up a mirror, looking back at yourself, and asking yourself, what do I think, what do I say, and what do I do all day long? And that's it. Which is interesting because we can get pretty worked up about what other people think and say and do all day long. But very rarely do we stop and explore what we think and what we say and what we do all day long. I mean, that's no fun. It's much easier to just complain about everybody else's, misery. This is a challenging practice. It really forces you to kind of be honest with yourself and, question your own moral, ethical behavior. I used to joke with the old Buddha for You when we were in the college area. There was a sign in the window. It said free meditation. Right? We were smack dab in the middle of Vaughn's. Pete smiled because he remembers it. Right in the middle of Vaughn's and I-10. Yes, I-10. Right? That's where we were. So we got to do meditation listening to whatever the people in I-10 were listening to. Some days it was the Beatles, some day it was Tupac, some days it was, God knows what. So we have to listen to music during that, but that's not my point, right? This practice is difficult. And free meditation is what most people come for, because they think that meditation is going to fix everything. So we packed that tiny little room, which was, about a quarter of this size. And I used to say, if the sign said free morality class, how many people do you think would have shown up? All day long, people walk by, free meditation. Oh, tell me about your free meditation. Right? If that said free morality, I'm pretty sure not one person in 10 years of being there would have walked in and said, hey, can you tell me about your free morality class? We don't want to look at that. And that's an important piece of this, which is overlooked, again, especially if you're new to it. How critical morality is on this path. And the Buddha taught that morality is really simple. Call them the 5 precepts. I had no intention of talking about this tonight, but here I am, as usual. To be fair, I never have any intention of anything I'm going to talk about tonight. So, but I definitely didn't think I would end up on the precepts. But I'll touch on them briefly for those who are maybe new to Buddhism, and for those who've heard them 1,000 times and still fail miserably at them. Here you go. All right. The first one, I love seeing the smiles on that because you're like, yes, I've heard it before and I still just can't do it, right? So here's a refresher for you. The first one he said was refrain from lying. Sounds simple, but watch yourself throughout the day or an hour and see how much you lie to yourself and you lie to others, okay? Second one is refrain from killing, from harming, right? Harming anything or anyone. Sounds simple, but we bring a lot of harm to a lot of creatures and sentient beings and animals and insects and people all day long. We bring a lot of harm to ourselves all day long. So refrain from harming. These are really fundamental core Buddhist teachings. The third precept he said was refrain from stealing, from taking what's not yours. You know, it sounds very simple, you know, unless anybody like robbed a liquor store today, right? We tend to think, well, I don't steal. But we take a lot from people. We take their time, we take their attention, we take their hearts, we take their, I don't know, whatever. We often take a lot that's not ours. So no lying, no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, right? Look at where your mind is at, how you engage in activities throughout your day. When you interact with people, whether it's, you know, intimate relationships or friendships, how do we interact with them? What is our intention in relationships? When we have loving, committed, intimate relationships, where is our intention at? Be aware of this. You know, if you're at a stage in your life and you're going out and you're dating and you're meeting people and, you know, all that kind of stuff, what's your intention? And the last one is no intoxicants, anything that alters the state of mind. Right? If the essence of the Buddhist teachings is to wake up to why we suffer and to be very honest and real with why we suffer, trying to figure that out while you've had 12 beers usually doesn't work so well, right? Anyone done any, like, lots of really wonderful, kind things after having 10 beers? Usually doesn't work out that way, okay? So things that alter the state of mind. These are phenomenal discussions with a college crew of 50 kids, right? So refrain from lying, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and intoxicants, or anything that alters the state of mind. But I really brought that up just to remind ourselves that the meditation and all this stuff about Buddhism, we often think it's something like outside of all of us. And our morality and ethical behavior and conduct is what creates so much conflict and what the Buddha called dukkha, suffering in our lives. So these are challenging practices, right? These are the first 5 as practitioners, as a Buddhist, that you take a vow to uphold. That's only 5. The Buddhist monks and nuns, they had anywhere from 227 to 311 precepts. That's a lot of stuff, right? These are just the basic 5. So often I'll challenge people to ask yourself, okay, what's the most difficult one for you? Lying, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, or intoxicants. And then challenge yourself to work on that for a day. I don't want to push you too much and tell you to work on it for a week. You know, I don't want you all to suffer. But try it. Pick one of those and see, can I work on this today or this week? And what you'll find out is that when you work on these and you do them less, you cause less suffering for yourself and others. Right? If we do all of those things that I mentioned, lie, kill, steal, sexual misconduct, and spend our lives intoxicated, then we tend to bring a lot of pain and suffering into the world. And the Buddha taught us to minimize and eventually remove suffering from our lives. So try it. If you do those things, it usually won't make your life worse. Right? Your life might not be as exciting, but it'll be a lot less headaches. You know. One of the metaphors I've used, and then I'll just open up to questions, is like if you go to Disneyland and you got like crazy big rides, Thunder Mountain and Matterhorn and whatever the other big one was. It's been a long time since I've been there. Space Mountain. And then you got the kiddie rides, that like you put the 5-year-olds on. And they're going really slow. They don't really go up or down. There's no huge highs. There's no huge crashes. But people don't typically get hurt on a kiddie ride. And for me, Buddhist practice all these years has been trying to integrate the kiddie ride into my life because the highs and the lows sucked. So the safe route is much more pleasant. So with that, I'll just stop and open up. Always prefer to just open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that's on your mind that I can address, and we'll go from there. Yes, sir.
This is it's trying to pick your brain here.
Yes.
I was thinking of a couple of questions to ask you while I was meditating. And I think I got a couple of them. So it's gonna be like a 3-part question.
Great.
Alright.
Sum it up, Ed. Come on.
Alright.
I've known him for years, so if I pick on him in advance, please don't just work with me here.
I'm gonna go with the light one first.
Okay.
So if you could see into the future, if you had the power to see into the future given to you,
Mm-hmm.
would you take it?
Normally I would just ignore that question, but since it's you, I'm going to respond to it. If I had the power to see into the future, would I take it?
Yeah.
No.
Can I ask why?
Of course you can ask why. That's your second question, so you just eliminated one of your other ones. I'm not concerned with the future. I'm concerned with the present moment because that's what dictates and determines the future. So even if one had, for me personally, and I'm not even just playing with you, like I'm serious, would I maybe like to see into the future to see when the Cubs win another World Series? Yes, but the reality is looking into the future, the only way the future happens is based on what we do in each moment of our lives. And so for me, even if I knew what the future was, I would still have to act accordingly to not screw it up. I don't believe in looking into the future that means that's what's actually going to happen. What I'm getting at is if I looked in the future and the future said I'm going to go that way, yet I spend the next 10 minutes going that way, I just ruined what I saw. I need to take care of what I'm doing now. That's what this path has taught me. And regardless of what the future holds, right, is the Buddha taught pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? The most important thing that I need to be aware of is what am I thinking now, what am I saying now, and what am I doing now? And learning to be in that present moment is really important. What future does is it tends to bring out in people stress, anxiety, worry, fear of death, fear of loneliness, fear of not having a job, fear of not having money, fear of not having a family, fear of not having friends, fear of whatever. So if you can go beyond fear and all of those things in each moment, whatever happens in the future, that's what happens. I want to create it. I don't want somebody to just tell me what it's going to be like, because that's ridiculous.
So I got one more.
That's right. You get one more. You said 3, and you took 2 up already. So go for it.
Okay, this is if you could be your higher power,
Right.
or God,
Yeah.
for one day, would you take that offer? Would you do it?
Sure. So the question is, if I could be my higher power or my God
You
for
already
one.
heard.
Hang on. You can answer my question now? 2? If I could be my higher power or my God, would I do it? That's your question, right? Okay. So the Buddha taught that there is no self. So if there is no self, and I'll come back to this, and this is for everybody as well, right? If there is no self, there is no self to have or not have a higher power.
Say that again.
I will, don't worry. If there is no self to have or not have a higher power. Okay? I'm not in recovery, so I don't want to ruin anybody. Like, if you're in recovery and you're working the steps, there's about 40 people downstairs doing it right now, and it talks about having, surrendering to your higher power. By all means, surrender to your higher power. That's what's going to keep you clean, sober, then do it. But I'm answering the question, and I'm not in recovery. There is no me to surrender. Me is just the ego, the pride, all the stuff that would lead to craving, would lead to addiction, would lead to suffering, is what is putting me in a position to potentially have to surrender to a higher power. If I cut through, when I look at the Buddhist teachings on non-self, it doesn't mean I'm not here, right? If you chop my arm off, it's going to hurt. But I'm here very differently than how I perceive myself to be. I've told myself a story my whole life about who I think Jeff is, where I was raised, how I was raised, who my friends were, all the experiences I've had, right? Being around this crazy place for the last 13, 14 years has all created a story in my head about what I think Jeff is. That is just a story. That's an illusion. That's a story that I'm telling myself about who I think myself is. All I am is a collection of my actions, my karma. There's no concrete inherent self to turn over to anyone. That self is just the pride, just the ego that thinks he must surrender.
You didn't answer the question.
I never answer your questions. Right? Keep surrendering, my friend.
All right.
It'll keep you clean, it'll keep you sober. Right? Yeah. I didn't say I would answer 3 questions, I just said you could ask 3 questions. I've known him since he was a teenager, which actually wasn't that long ago, but yeah. Other questions that I want to answer? Yes, sir.
Essential reading. Like,
Yes.
do you have one thing or 1 or 2 books or readings that would be recommended?
Garfield and Dr. Seuss.
Sweet.
Yes. Have you read them?
Oh, absolutely.
You have, right? Do they make you smile when you read them?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Well, only read the ones that make you smile then.
All right.
Yeah. Often people ask that question, like recommended readings. And yes, and I'll give you a couple. But what I also want to say about books is that they're incredibly important to read, but you don't have to read 50 of them. I know that wasn't your question. This is just for everybody, right? Find a couple Buddhist books that you like and read them and read them well, right? Understand them, integrate them. To me, one of the best Buddhist books out there, I'll give you 2. It's called Lotus in the Stream, written by Master Xing Yun, translated by Tom Graham. He was my first master, and Tom I knew very well at the temple down here in San Diego, where I started at 17 years ago. He was a 50-year-old dude from Middle America, really understood Western culture, really understood, he was fluent in Chinese, so he translated really beautiful teachings. And each chapter is about 15 pages. Covers 4 Noble Truths, 8-Fold Paths, 6 Paramitas, dependent origination, karma, rebirth, how to practice Buddhism. It touches on all of these things. And I swear to this day, just about everything I've been talking about all these years, I learned in that book. And I keep saying it and I keep doing it because I keep failing miserably. And I keep trying. So the diligence is there, right? That one's out of print. You can get it on Amazon. They redid it, which is very similar, and I think it's called Core Teachings. Right? I can make sure I write it down for you after. The second one is Zen Mind, Beginner Mind. Zen Mind, Beginner Mind by Shinra Suzuki. Mm-hmm. That's a book that I would read over and over and over again. You've read it, read it again. Because it's just each time you read it, it reminds yourself to just get over yourself, to put it very bluntly. Right? I mean, that's what it is. It's about cutting through all the crap, kind of everything I was talking about with that self. It's about cutting through all of that. Leaving no trace, which to me is not being wrapped up in what we've built or created. Those are the two that I'm a huge fan of. Yeah. Another one, Thich Nhat Hanh is a beautiful version of the Heart Sutra, which is really phenomenal. It's called the Heart of Understanding, I believe. Typically a purple book with white letters, the Heart of Understanding, and it's a really detailed. You familiar with the Heart Sutra?
Not really.
So Google Heart Sutra. You'll read it. It'll make no sense whatsoever, right? You know the basic teachings, right? Four Noble Truths says suffering, cause of suffering, greed, anger, ignorance, right? The ending of suffering, and the path. That's like the first Buddhist teaching and the heart of Buddhist teachings. And the Heart Sutra says there is no suffering, there is no cause of suffering, there is no cessation of suffering, and there is no path whatsoever.
Yeah.
So read the Heart Sutra, and then I recommend Thich Nhat Hanh's translation, where he gives really good, I think, applicable teachings on it.
Cool.
Yeah. It is that self that causes all of our suffering. And that's where the Buddha said there is no self. Again, that doesn't mean you're not real, doesn't mean you're not there. It just means you are very different from how you think you are. You're not as bad as you think you are. You're not as good as you think you are. You're not as right as you think you are. You're not as wrong as you think you are. You're just a collection of your actions, of your karma, like I said earlier. You are what you think, what you say, and what you do. That's your karma. That's what you create in the world. That doesn't you make who you are. It's just what you do. So, yeah. But I still opt for Dr. Seuss and Garfield, man. You know, anything that makes you smile is where I'm going with that. Things that make your heart happy. It's important. Other questions?
The five, whatever
Yeah.
you said. What is sexual misconduct? Each culture has their own rules. One's a sin, one's a blessing, you know. I mean,
Sure.
certain actions.
Not really.
It's not procreation, it's not.
So sexual misconduct, right? What all of these precepts have to do with, especially, well, all of them, or I shouldn't say especially that one, has to do with intention. Okay? So first off, with sexual misconduct, the Buddha taught very clearly, right? And a lot of people, if you're brand new to Buddhism, people might see monks or nuns and the Buddha himself and the disciples, and in most Buddhist traditions where you have monastic culture, monks and nuns, they choose a path of celibacy, right? That's their choice. Then you have millions of lay Buddhists out there that are married and have families and have kids and have intimate, loving relationships and, you know, are sexually active and things like that. And that's fine as well. But very clearly, are you in a loving, committed relationship when you are engaging in these interactions? Or are you just doing things to feed your ego, for instant gratification, to feel better? Are you honest and open with the person that you're engaging with? Do you both understand where you're coming from, right? Things like pornography, things that you look at, things that you see, okay? Things your eyes focus on. Sexual misconduct doesn't necessarily have to be physical interaction, because all of this stuff is your mind. It's the images that we see in our mind over and over and over again, right? It's all the stuff that pops up on our screens. Do we look at it? Do we look away? Is it feeding greed? Is it feeding anger? Is it feeding ignorance? Is it feeding into a system of suffering and abuse? All of these things, not just physical interaction, but mental, because everything starts with the mind anyways, right? All of these things.
But if you're not in a loving relationship and don't intend to be,
Then be honest and open if you're going to be interacting in a physical manner with people, right? Or are you interacting with physical people just to feel good and you don't really care about the person? That is sexual misconduct. If you're going out and you're hooking up with people, just, again, phenomenal topics to have with 20-year-olds on a college campus, right? But if you're going out and you're getting drunk and you're just trying to hook up with somebody because you want to feel better and tell somebody how cool you are, or whatever it is, sexual misconduct. Doesn't mean like you have a talk on this stuff and then it's absolutely going to stop, I don't share this thinking all of you are going to drastically change your lives, but the question very directly is, what is sexual misconduct? So if you're not in a loving, committed relationship and you're going to engage physically with people, do they understand that you don't want a loving, committed relationship? Do they understand that you might not even know them or care about them? Do you understand that you're just trying to do what you're doing? Maybe I'm just painting a picture. Do they understand that maybe you're engaging in this just because you want to feel good for you and you don't even care about them? All of these things are the intention that we have behind how we treat other people. Does that make sense? And very often for a lot of people, that means if you're going to follow the teachings on sexual misconduct, then you're not going to be out much. Not you personally, but that's what I said for a lot of people, right? And so even beyond like your original question about kind of cultures and how everybody treats it differently, when you look at the Buddhist teachings, they're all beyond really culture. It doesn't matter what culture you're from to know what is your intention behind engaging in someone, in actions with someone. So it's not about what culturally is appropriate or not. It's where your mind is at, even if it's culturally accepted. Your mind would tell you otherwise. Yeah, sure.
Might sound like a silly question, but it has to do with do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
After the rains, we had ants come into our house, and I had a massive complex about getting rid of them.
Yes,
Do you have any insights on?
I do. We only have a few minutes left, so fortunately for all of you, I can only speak on it for a few minutes, and I won't go into 2 hours on the ants. Here's the crazy thing. Did you say a massive colony of ants, right? I didn't have the word colony. You said massive. You said
A massive amount.
Okay, a massive amount of ants after the rain came in. You know what came in before the rains to the massive amounts of ants who are living peacefully? You.
We do. Yep.
Somebody built that house or wherever you're living, and then you rolled in, and those ants were just fine. And we stormed in, and we built all these things on their land. Right? Did we ask them if they minded? No. This is where you start to think that I am really crazy. Not you personally, you already know that, but anybody else who didn't know. Right? So the idea would do no harm. I love ants, fascinated by ants. And the crazy thing is, you may have seen it, but if you've never seen it, if you ever see and you watch ants where one ant has been harmed, and you'll literally see like half an ant, and they're still moving, and you'll see other ants pulling them along, right? And ants or all insects, all that kind of stuff, right? My mother would always say, like, she always had a fly swatter, right? And so when I used to go to her house, I would actually steal the fly swatter. When I first got into Buddhism, right, I would go to her house and then I would steal the fly swatter. Then she'd have a fly and she's like, Jeffrey, where is my fly swatter? And now she would, every time she sees a spider or anything, she would put a cup on it and carry it outside.
We release the spiders. We release every bug that comes into the house.
The ants.
The ants are a little tougher.
They're tougher. And when you ask them to leave, they don't leave.
I know.
It sucks. It's really hard, I don't have an answer for you. When we do things that cause harm, okay, and I don't say this as a justification because often people will say, someone will say, like, I eat meat, but before I eat the burger, I send loving kindness to the animal that was killed. The animal didn't want your loving kindness. They didn't want to be killed. They don't need your loving kindness after they've been killed. And I'm not a preacher for being vegan or vegetarian, right? But understand that we cause harm. And in that moment, own that karma. That's my, I don't know if I'd call it guidance, advice, suggestion. When you killed all those ants to move them out, understand that that's what you did and feel that pain and that suffering. Because if we feel that, it might change the way we treat other animals and insects and people and things like that. Short of asking them to leave or living with them all, I don't have much advice for you, right? It's tough. But yes, to do no harm applies to all of them. And again, I really think it's important to understand that when we do things like that, to honor the fact or to accept the fact that we are bringing harm, you know? Someone said years ago, they said that, to them, fishing was a meditation. And somebody else said, yes, only if you don't hear the silent screams of the fish. So it's important to understand that do no harm means to not cause harm. And that most of us would be totally fine without causing harm. Right? But we do it anyways. We contribute to a way of life that causes harm, whether it be, insects, animals, or people. Same thing. I always tell myself they were here first. They didn't do anything wrong. They're just hanging out. We don't like them, so we stomp on them. So just think about that, because it hurts. Tough one. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions? Fun topics tonight. Yeah.
Does do no harm also apply to plants?
So
I met a sensitive plant, and
right.
my life changed.
Yeah, I'll tell you what the Buddhist teachings are, right? And the Buddha was just one person. It doesn't mean like that's, the Buddha said anything that has consciousness. Now, then people can debate and argue that plants have consciousness, right? I've seen the studies myself of the plants in one area, and they did all kinds of stuff to them. They started to wilt, and then they moved them, and they did all kinds of pleasant things. They started to, so that's what the Buddha said. The Buddha said any sentient being, and sentient being is defined as anything that has consciousness, right? So I think with all of these things around the do no harm, right, the intoxicants, whatever ones that we struggle with, it's really important to ask yourself, and I don't mean this towards you, Anne, but like to ask ourselves, are we justifying what we're doing? Or are we just not able to do them yet? Anytime I do a talk on the precepts, I always joke and I say, I know at the end of the night, half the people are probably going to go home and they're going to drink their bottle of wine or have their beer and talk about the precept talk they just had, right? So the precepts aren't there for you to judge yourself. They're not like bad or wrong or evil. It's not like if you have a beer, you're going to like Buddhist hell, right? Especially if you're new to Buddhism, it's really important to understand this. The important thing to understand is when you do those things, what type of situation are you creating for yourself or others? And if you're not ready to do, these things in your life, then you're just not ready, and that's fine, right? So I think that's a really good thing for us to ask ourselves is, where do we struggle with these 5 and why? And not hate yourself or think you're a bad person or a bad Buddhist or a bad whatever if you struggle in these areas. And that's part of, the lying. Like, be honest with yourself. Right? If you're someone who's not willing to give up, eating animals, then say, I'm not willing to give this up yet. But pay attention to that. And at least acknowledge that pain and suffering went into that cycle that we were feeding into by doing those things. Right? Open the eyes to that. So I think that's part of honesty. Yeah. Anything else before we close? Yes.
I just got to add a thing about the ants.
I know you do.
Let's say the room is clear, there's no ants, and then you spray. It's really just a repellent.
What's just a repellent? The stuff that kills them when they come in, or?
I don't think they're gonna walk in and start eating them.
Okay,
They'll smell it and leave. I
understand. I have a great response for you, Al. There's a temple we go to in Irvine, Baofa Temple. It's a beautiful Taiwanese temple. We take groups there a couple times a year. Love it very dearly. It's very special to us. And they have an ant problem, right? What we would call an ant problem. What they would call just ants, right? We call it a problem. They call them ants, okay? So where the sleeping quarters are wood platforms, and that's where you sleep. What they do is during ant season, whatever season that is, which is usually year-round up there, they take, I believe it's boric, some sort of boric powder, and they outline like rectangles of boric powder with a couple feet in between. And in the middle of that little rectangle is where you sleep. So the ants come up to it, it repels them, but it doesn't kill them. So I'm sure when you said if you just put stuff out, that's what you were talking about.
Borax or whatever.
Yeah, borax, whatever, I always forget what it's called.
Kitchen, whatever.
Right.
You're not killing them.
I'm not saying you got to hang out and live with them. Right? But yes, the idea is, am I putting stuff out there that's harming them, or am I putting stuff out there that just says, okay, I live here now? Ask yourself that question, definitely. You know, yeah. You're all gonna have fun stuff to think about tonight. So, did you have a last one? I'm gonna close.
I was just wondering, like, what about like, if you're not, okay, so predators, like.
Such as, like people, you mean? Like,
No, like cultivating a spider for the ants, but technically down line, they're harming the ants, right? So that, it's just.
yes, yes. Thank you for removing me from having to respond to it. It's this endless cycle, you know, where we can get ourselves wrapped up in the justifications and the stories of, yes, we should have this. At the end of the day is, the way I look at it is, am I as an individual causing harm, and why? Right? Not the justifications of it, which we can always do, you know? So, all right, so we'll join palms and close. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most at this moment.